Okay, hi. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. All right. Thumbs up. Okay, I can see people reacting there. Great. All right, guys. Welcome to the Good AI from Seattle. Actually, today we have a excellent speaker. Um, Let me introduce the group, and I'm going to introduce the keynote speaker. Some of you may have met him. He was on table one. But just quickly, brief intro about the group. So we are TheGoodAI Org. We are a small community from Seattle. We started 2 years ago with in-person meetups and just with the intent to create awareness and talk about issues of ethics and bias in AI. And that's how we started, with 4 or 5 people at meeting pretty much every month. And from there on, we started to grow our network. We joined forces with AI in philosophy, AI in ethics, AI in faith, a lot of different groups, and suddenly we found that this topic was so important for people, and we have thousands of people now as part of the community, and across boundaries of Seattle and even United States. So we have people joining from different countries every time now since we moved online as of March. So welcome. I won't take too much time talking about this group. We'll network again after the session. It'll be about 30 to maybe 45 minutes session, but feel free to raise your hand. There should be a raise hand on the top right corner. And when you do, we'll know that you have a question, and we'll bring you on the stage to ask the question, or you can type your question in the chat. So with that, I'll quickly introduce today's speaker. So his name is Hisham Qaddoumi, and he's from Toronto, Canada, a TEDx speaker, cybersecurity expert, and above all, has got a great mind and a lot of work history in AI. He's passionate public speaker. He's into music, mental health, lots of things. But above all, he loves people, and you guys are going to love the session, hopefully. So Hisham, I don't know if I need to bring you on the stage, or are you able to turn on your camera? Come on stage.
Okay.
Hey, Hisham.
Yeah, I was unable to join for some reason, but now I accept your invitation.
Okay, perfect. Hisham, take it away.
Hey, so everybody, welcome to the Good AI meetup. It's very interesting to be here and to talk to you guys. I know some of you and some of you are new to me, but I hope the talk today will be interesting to everybody of you. We chose this topic with Vikram because it's a part of a bigger speak that I do in different types of sessions about ethical AI and how you create like ethical algorithms and use ethical data or clean data, and it takes into a lot of things, not just AI. Part of it is an AI, and there's data science into. It's a big topic. I choose portions of it according to the event and to the topics that we're doing, and because there's a lot of racial talk nowadays and a lot of problems here and there about that, we just decided to do something about biases in AI, specifically the racial biases. So without further ado, I'm gonna go and start sharing. Hey, can anyone see? Can everybody see this? I don't know if you can. Okay, I see that you can see it. All right, so let's go ahead. So we hear a lot today nowadays about AI biases, racial biases, and all of this in AI. And I keep telling people, you know what? AI is not biased. AI is not racist. It's us who are biased. It's us as humans who have racial biases or anything. But AI inherits these kinds of biases. It's why I prefer to call it inherited biases in AI, because AI is not biased. AI is of course not racist. But it happens. And in all of my research about biases and ethical AI, I would try to realize or to understand what's happening there, so we can fix it, so we can realize where the problem is and fix that. So this is a part of what I found out from working a lot. As I told you, I've worked a lot in AI. We worked a lot in cybersecurity. That's me doing a TEDx speak. But the thing you have to know is, like, I worked a lot in mass surveillance, and mass surveillance reveals a lot of of crap about biases and how people could get into trouble for small things. That made me stop working into these things. I mean, I'm pausing that and I'm trying to concentrate on how to fix what I discovered, since I started working on these things since 2008 to around 2008, 2009. So this is part of what I'm passionate about. So we have this topic. I want to start quickly about something that we call the OODA loop, because this is going to make a lot of sense to you. How do we develop um, algorithms that does a lot of investigations for crime, profiling criminals, profiling even terrorists. Counterterrorism was part of the thing that we worked on. So we were basing this on something called the OODA loop. And the OODA loop is something that developed by the United States Air Force Colonel John Boyd. He's very known into that. It was a concept. It was not made for AI. That was like back in the 60s. And it's now like the de facto method for anything that we do for cybersecurity operations, and also besides the normal security operations. So how does that work? It's called the OODA loop because it starts with four words. It's observe, orient, decide, then act. That's OODA. So the algorithms that we develop to catch criminals, or to see what's possibly if there's going to be a possible attack here or there, and who might actually do this kind of attacks, who are eligible to do these attacks. So this is all we observe the data through collecting a lot of this thing. Then we orient them. We start to look into them and pick up the signals. Then we have the decision of that. Is an attack possible on that location at that time by those people, and then we act on it. So a lot of these systems are used currently in something we call predictive policing. A lot of those softwares, and I know that most of you guys are in our neighbors in the United States, and with the protests that were happening recently, there were a lot of protesters were caught. I'm going to talk about that in a different slide, but I'm just letting you caught after they protest. They found out that they were caught because of some AI application and predictive policing application. So we're going to see how that actually created a segregation and biases against those protesters. So let me talk also about mass surveillance and AI, because mass surveillance is a huge thing, and a lot of people do not understand that. It's actually it's to it's to monitor and to try to find uh, problems and solutions by monitoring huge sectors or smaller sectors of citizens, or traffic, or an information that comes from a specific location, and try to analyze it and find solutions for that. Now mass surveillance recently, as I told you from my own experience, created a lot of segregations because of the biased data that it inherited from tens and tens of years of racial data that was added to the system, or even racial biased actions that caused this data to come in. Like we were talking before that on the table, on the number of incarcerations in the United States is highest among minorities and blacks, and that might be accurately true, but that's not actually because minorities do more crimes. It's because of the inherited racial biases through many years, even centuries, of incarcerating people of different skin color, or different gender, even, or different sexual orientations, all through a lot of years, more than specific groups of people. So that creates also that kind of segregation when inherited. And that created a lot of issues recently when the protests happened. So the major application of AI in mass surveillance is like city surveillances, like in smart cities, crowd control. I mean, if you go in every mall, you have all those cameras all the way, and it's just there. Most of those are not just using them as a security cameras or monitoring. They also do crowd control if they notice that there are abnormal behavior, or even in airports mostly as well, of a group of people because they were running out from a fire or something like that, and it helps in or maybe at a Christmas time, something like that. It helps doing some crowd control. We have traffic management. Of course, we have military surveillance, like in border surveillance, air surveillance, digital border protection, etc. And as you know, we have in counterterrorism, geo monitoring. For those of you who don't know, it's like if someone or a specific, like let's say a truck fleet that are supposed to go in a specific path, specific streets or specific areas, and if they go over that, geologically, the system is gonna trigger a warning or trigger an alarm or something like that, and tell them that you have done a geofence, a geographical offense. You are not supposed to be in that area, and of course. In some countries, like in China, they do it for something called social misconduct. So if you cross the street, if you jaywalked, first time, second time, or something, you will find your picture on a something they call the shame wall. And if you've done that many times, you might find yourself on the no-fly list. So this is a part of new authoritarian kind of mass surveillance. Now, the good things about mass surveillance is keep communities safe from crime and terrorism. Important also for capture bad actors before they or even after they commit a bad crime. And the bad side of it is, of course, it might get innocent people in trouble, and it's definitely, we saw that it creates more segregation for minorities and vulnerable communities. Okay, so let's go with the other thing. The battle with biases is a very old story. Now, as I told you, people are saying that AI is biased. There's nothing. First of all, I prefer something called machine biases because it's happening even before AI. But the thing is, machines and AI are not biased by nature. It's just how we inherit that bias from us, and the bias comes from two things: either the the way that you develop these algorithms, they can be biasly designed, or the data, and this is where most bias comes from. I mean, like, that's not statistic speaking, but from my own experience, I think at least 80 to 90% of the biases in AI comes from biased data, and the rest, like 10 or 20%, is from biased algorithms. But here's the thing: I mean, like, the algorithms use this data and they do not check the accuracy of it, and they, of course, they cannot detect human biases or can fix them. And what I've seen even here in Canada, I mean, which where people say that we are less biased and all, but even here, I couldn't see that any current training for or federal funded educational programs for law enforcement or personnel on racial sensitivity, cultural differences, respect, disability handling. The thing about it is it's not just about the skin color. There are a lot of people get incarcerated because they're deaf, and when they do like a simple uh, car pull, their car's been pulled for any reason, they start signing with their hands, and this is because they don't talk. The police think that they are trying to do something, and they immediately incarcerate them, or sometimes they even shoot them because they think that they wanted to take a gun or do something wrong, but they actually just trying to talk, you know. And there's unfortunately, this causes a lot. It's caused actually a lot of issues for that matter, and there's no official background checkups for law enforcement candidates in regard of racism, biases, extreme religious beliefs, or political alliances. There was a lot of people in the law enforcement that discovered to have very extreme opinions. Some of them were even joining uh, uh, Facebook groups the white supremacists, and very right-wing groups, and they were having a lot of extremist opinions about minorities and about different religions, or even people with different sexual orientation. So there's no checkup for that. They do a lot of checkup on psychological. Are they, do they have like things like schizophrenia or something like that, or but they don't even go deep in. I even didn't see them go deep even in things like depression or something like that. So I didn't expect them to go deep into the human behavior. So that's caused a lot of issues, as I know. And I'm going to tell you, this thing is actually, the story is before AI, and a story about two humans. This guy is called Ibrahim, or Abe Mashal. He was actually an Egyptian American citizen. I think he was born in the US or came when he was very young. He was a straight up citizen, no criminal records of any kind. He has many tours. He was a veteran. He has many tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. He was honorably discharged from the US Army. What happened to him is sought spiritual help from his mosque, the imam of his mosque. He was not very religious, but when his father died, that shocked him a lot. And he was wondering about life and death. He was very attached to his father, so he sought something, a spiritual help. So he went to the imam of the masjid where his father was actually praying, and he knew his father very well. But what happened to them is suddenly he found himself on a no-fly list. He was suffering for that for many years. He was trying to seek information from military, from his own, military group, from the CIA, from the police, from everybody. He didn't have anything on. Everybody was giving him bits and pieces, but nobody told him about that until he figured out somehow after many years. And he was, even after he was cleared for that, and he's just like, I was just trying to do something. I wasn't trying to do something bad. He was still on that no-fly list for years and years. While the other human, and I'm not going to mention his name because he's done a very bad thing, and the Prime Minister of New Zealand was saying, don't mention his name because that's what he wants. But I think you all know this guy. He was an Australian living in New Zealand. He posted many anti-Islamic posts on multiple white supremacist groups, by the way, in this time and age of all this surveillance. He glorified a Bosnian Serb war, the Bosnian Serb war criminal. The Bosnian Serb war criminal, where like more than like I think 50,000 or something like this people from Muslim tribes were killed in Bosnia as a as a revenge, kind of a genocide. He posted a terrorist manifest online right before he actually took some automatic weapons and killed 50 Muslim worshippers in a 17-minute live video on Facebook. He was streaming this live, and no one talked about it. No one noticed. And all of this history, was never on any watch list anywhere, not in his country, not on New Zealand, or not even in the United States, or anywhere, actually. So you can see that story, actually, Abe Mashal, that happened very long time ago. This one is very new, but you can see that biases doesn't have to do anything with AI. Bias is created by people, and it's because people are biased. It's because law enforcement segregates sometimes against specific minorities. Because okay, so there's a lot of terror that happens in the Arab world or Islamic world, so that makes it okay to brush all of that sect with being possible terrorists or something like that. And black people, they say there's a lot of crime in black neighborhoods or something, so they paintbrush all black people. They're saying they are possible criminals. They don't know that even the violence or anything that happens in those black neighborhoods are actually created because of the segregation that was going on for centuries and centuries. So just wanted to show you these stories to understand that biases is not a new thing, and it inherited in AI because that's the data that was coming. Okay, so machine biases that are caused by human data. Let's have a look at some some insight about how does that happen. For example, that human biases affect both data and design, as I told you, and it trickles down on the issues and problems that keep piling up with a greater difficulty to solve day by day. Because AI is very fast and it builds up very faster than any human being. So if you give them a biased data, even if it was small, it's going to build up on it and then build up more and build up more. This buildup is going to be rapid. So the problems with segregation is going to get greater by time, not be actually solved. Well, the idea of creating AI is to help us solve these issues, but from the other side, it might pile up the bias issues. Also, the social and political climate that is produced by these issues will push minorities group to even more segregation. I want to tell you something, and this is from our of my history of also of like massive events and all. Uh, People by nature, they like, specifically when they are new immigrants or just came in like generation one or generation two of immigrants, they like to live in places where they feel that they are more culturally accepted, where there are people from their own culture or a very similar culture live in that area. This is why a lot of places inside the United States are known by zip codes to be hosting a specific minority, because people like to of similar culture, similar I don't know, similar understandings, similar language, similar skin color. They'd like to live together. That's a human nature. So what is happening with that? It's nowadays there's a lot of biases that are created against minorities, not because we put the information. I mean, like, if you want to get a mortgage or something, you don't get your race information inside the mortgage application, but you find out that you might get rejected because you're black, not because actually the AI knew that you're black, but because you live in a zip code that is full of black people who are poor and who cannot actually, who has people having problem with paying mortgages, a history of that. So you say, like, it just say that this he lives in that zip code that is known of people do not pay mortgages a lot because they are poorer kind of a community or something. And most of these people who live there are black, so it becomes a racial issue because the zip code and people who lived there together, because they were afraid of a social abnormality, or of a social judgments if they lived in different within other different minorities or majorities. They live together, so that inherits actually by zip code. There's a lot of cases, by the way, of people who were rejected. There are actually white people who were rejected, who were moved into black neighborhoods and were rejected even though they have no problems, but because of living in that zip code. So it's, but well, of course, majority of that place were black, so it affected the minorities more than it affects majorities. This graph, I love that because this shows the cognitive bias codex. These are the biases that our brains does have. So as you can see in this graph, we have about 188 different types of biases, whether they are conscious or unconscious. And that we actually inherit that to people around us, to our kids, to our relatives, our friends, and of course to the data that we put and to the algorithms that we develop. I've actually heard another resource that we have a specific bias that stops us from seeing other biases, and this codex is actually should be not 188 but around 250 different biases. So 188 I think is way too much, but I like to show you that, so you know that this is the source of biases. Okay, so let me go back here. Right. So the major source of data biases is, first of all, as I said, data is a social mirror. So if the training data reflects existing social biases against a minority, the algorithm is going to, of course, incorporate it. sample size disparity, that is very, very important. Even here in Canada, we have a lot of problems with our healthcare system. As you know, the healthcare system is in Canada is for everybody, but still the sample data of, like, for example, the indigenous people is way too small, because a lot of them were segregated for many years, and a lot of them did not want to go to hospital and all of these things because of a lot of conditions. It's mostly about segregation. So the sample data for indigenous people is very small. So even the way that they take medication and all, sometimes it doesn't work for them, because we don't have enough data, because they were, for a long time, they were a segregated community, a segregated part of the society. Cultural differences. So the statistical pattern that apply to the majority might be invalid within the minority group. That's, of course, no. One single variable might positively correlated with the target in the general population, might be negatively correlated in a minority group. Diverse name in ethnic, like an example is the diverse name in an ethnic group. That goes into a lot of when you talk about careers and job searching, and your name that appears on the resume, and the biases against the AI by inherited biases against foreign names. So if your name is John, or I don't know, or Jennifer, it's gonna be less. You can be less difficult for you to find a job than if your name was Pradeep or Fatima, for example. So that is another thing. There's undesired complexity, many differences overlapping in minorities data groups. The combination of, which is the sample of it, is the combination of a separate classifiers for them is complex. Now this is very complex to explain, but it's a lot of factors that create a complexity of how to analyze the data of them from those minorities, and how to understand it from the beginning, which is going to create that complexity that is not going to be understood by AI, and it's going to go back to defaults. The defaults come from majority, which does not apply to those minorities. And the last, noise and the meaning of the 5% error. I mean, anyone who works in AI knows what the noise is, I believe. Like, one of the examples is of noise is, if you added a little bit noise to an image, it might guess it like a total different other image. Just few dots. Your eye cannot see it, but an AI, because it goes pixel per pixel, it might give a different guess for what this image is. We're going to have a look at some of those things now. Also, if if you are interested, I am also having another event. Vikram and I, we will. It's not a part of this group, but I told Vikram about it, and we might do something shared for people of this group. Uh, it's a topic about white supremacy and neo-Nazism in modern American history from 1970s to 2020. It's not just about the United States. I'm talking about it, but it's what started in the United States and it spreads out. So we might talk about more details about that from a historical point of view in a different event. Okay, so let's go to our next topic, which is major AI bias cases. This is not funny, but this is where fun starts, because this is where you can understand everything that I just told you about. This is where you see that where exactly it happens. So, for example, we have this guy, Vernon Prater, and predictive policing software, I think I told you about, have predicted that the risk of this guy is 3, low risk out of 10. We're talking, of course, but this girl, Brisha Borden, is a high risk of 8. Now we can see that he's male, he's a white male, and she is a dark female. Okay, and of course you can see from the source. Here's the assessment in criminal sentencing, all the data about that. I'm just showing you the results. Now, if you look at the history of those guys, you look at that. This guy have prior offenses of 2 armed robberies, 1 attempted armed robbery, and subsequent offenses is 1 grand theft. Brisha, poor Brisha, have only 4 juvenile misdemeanors and none subsequent offenses, yet she's got 8 and he's got 3. Now, there are a lot of reasons for that, but also for poor Bisha living in a neighborhood or in a zip code that has high crimes because it was segregated for hundreds of years and it's so poor, it was one of the factors that created this high number. Now, is this data accurate according to the data that comes? Sorry, is this prediction right according to the data? Yes, it is accurate. Is it right? No. Of course, we know that, as you can see. Okay, so I'm going to show you this fun. This is a clip about a TV show called Better Off Dead. That was in 2009, and I hope that you guys can hear that. Um, Sorry.
Hello? Motion sensors.
Did you hear it? Okay, let's continue because last time, did anybody hear everything here? Did you like it? Okay, so just so you know, this thing happened. This thing was like 2009, and it was just just a TV show. I couldn't show you the whole thing because it's a 20 minutes kind of episode, and because of copyright. But they actually fixed it at the beginning. They restored the whole thing back. But funny things, very funny things happened. But the funny thing about it is 2019. 10 years after this was aired for the first time, we had a similar issue with also a water tap. So there was this solution that was to fix the problem with the water tap sensors. You know that water tap sensors work, on the motion, the movement. So if you put your hands under it, it senses that there's something and it just starts pouring water. But because sometimes people leave stuff into the sink, the sensor knows that there's something and it keeps just pouring water, and this has a lot of waste. So some company developed a system to sense when their hands actually under the sink. So it looks at the object and said if this object is hands, it starts pouring water. If it's not going to do anything. So again, if when black people or dark skinned people, sorry, put their hands under those sinks, it didn't work. It didn't recognize that they have hands. And I've heard also from a friend of mine who was actually, this system was in the installed in the University of Toronto, that even a white female put her hands under the sink and she couldn't get anything because practically mostly I suggested, I mean, like I could have expected that this model was trained mostly on white male hands. So even if a female hand was under the sink, it was not recognizable. And one a black professor in the University of Toronto told me this funny story that for her to use the system, she has to put the palm of her hands, which has like a lighter color, and she has to put it very, very near to the sensor where the lights are, so it looks more white, and then she could get some water. So that is 2009 imagination versus 2019 sad reality. Okay, and the other thing here is, I'm sure you've all heard about it. It's a very old story, but it still counts because it was Google. Google Photos was showing photos of black people, recognizing them as gorillas. I mean, like, this is way too effed up from a company like Google, who have like a large repository of images of all types, yet they didn't train their model enough to recognize black people and to differentiate black people from gorillas, which is really, really embarrassing. So another case that happened just recently, and there's a pixelation kind of a software that you can put a really pixelated, small, low resolution image, and it's going to try and fix it up. It's going to like scale it up and get it back to what it should be or what it expected to be as a photo. And one guy who tested it on a photo of Obama, and the system really actually reconstructed that pixelated picture of Obama as a white man. Here's what he put. This is the pixelated photo of Obama, and this is what the system gave back. And it was not just once time. He actually tried multiple times, and every time he was still getting a white male. Now, I cannot think of an African American person who has more photos ever on the internet or anywhere, and accessible photos and free accessible, because he was a public figure rather than President Obama. So I don't know what happened here, how the system was not trained enough on this kind of data, and why does it get back everything. Like even the face doesn't even look like this. I mean, like even the whole thing, the whole facial structure doesn't look exactly like that one. And again, as I would expect, it was mainly maybe trained mostly on white male faces. So so this happened. Okay, and another case that happened also recently with the protests. So AI was tracking protesters even after protests, and this is it. We talked about predictive policing. This is part of the software that predictive policing is using. This is caused by something called Clearview AI that was created by this young, ambitious man. And it has like about 3 billion images that were collected from everywhere on the internet. Of course, mostly from social media websites like Google, Facebook, and all. And it uses those images to recognize people anywhere. So police or whoever have an access to this, whoever buys the service from those guys, can post a picture of you. Even a stalker can do that, can post a picture of you, and it would search all this, and it finds photos of you everywhere, and it would tell details about you to whoever searches through only a photo. So somebody can take a picture of you in a restaurant, not just in a protest, in a restaurant, or walking down the streets, or in a school. A stalker wants to know who you are, just could put that and put it in that database. But of course, the police used that, and they were taking videos and photos from that were posted online from different media sites, or people who post themselves or other protests on social media, and put it into that system to know who actually those protesters that appears in those photos and videos. Now, of course, there was a case of cease and desist from firstly was Twitter, but then I think Facebook and Google followed that. Cease and desist for those photos that because they said that you're using our data, the data that comes from our users, from our platform, you're not allowed to do that. And of course, I think it's about to reach the Supreme Court or reach that, but this happened in a lot of courts around the United States, and they were citing the First Amendment and the freedom of speech, something like that. I don't know what's the link between collecting data without the people's consent have to do with the First Amendment, but I'm just letting you know that this is what is happening, and they are citing freedom of speech to stop these cease and desist cases. So that's Clearview AI. Now, the last thing that I'm going to talk about this thing is about also the social platform Inflame racial biases through through the content that it's put there. And I'm not, of course, claiming that they're doing this on purpose or anything like that, but those platforms give access to a lot of people. There are trillions of posts every day on those, and they cannot monitor everything. And some of those posts goes viral, seen by millions and millions of people before it gets removed. And even after that, people just take screenshots, share it on other social media, and then it goes down. And even some of them share it underground or through emails or whatever. So it happens. And the sad facts are 60% of adults in the United States get their news from social platform. And of course, some of the pages on the social platform are from respected media sources like TVs or or media outlets. But unfortunately, most of the news on social media are from very untrusted source resources. And you can imagine if 60% taking, so it would be mostly from fake news websites. So the checkup on misinformation also by social platforms started recently, and it's not very efficient because it's sometimes playing a word with the language even could cause those AIs to not know to decide if this is a suspicious or a fake news or whatever, and it just leaves it out there. Not to mention that there are a lot of ways to play on it. Like, for example, in China, because they stop every post that talks bad about the government or anything, people there have found a way to create posts using only emojis, which is a very difficult thing for an AI to analyze and understand. Some official entities also rely on unreliable news sources. I believe that most of you have heard about the Rohingya genocide in the Myanmar against the Rohingya tribe, who are Muslims. The military in Myanmar were relying on news that come from extreme right-wing groups on Facebook. That was all fake and untrue, but they were relying on them and they were acting on that. And as you know, politicians started to interfere, even threaten social platforms for checking on their own content or their supporters' content. So we heard about threatening that we're gonna sue you, we're gonna go after you, and sometimes even we're gonna close you. So I mean, like, from one side, the same politicians say those social platforms are biases. They let a lot of content that is when it's against them, they say like this is a lot of biased content, and when they fact check on them or their supporters, they say like, oh no, we have to stop them. So it's a very complicated thing. Okay, so the battle with AI biases in security and cybersecurity. That's the last thing that okay. So let me just say that algorithmic. First of all, algorithmic bias describes the systemic and repeatable errors in a computer system that creates unfair outcomes, such as privileging one arbitrary group of users over others. I don't want to read the whole thing, but from this first phrase, you can understand that segregation, as racial segregation and social segregation. It's not just racial. You look at the full community, specifically here in the United States and Canada, North America. We have a very diverse group of communities that are either from ethnicities, backgrounds, religious beliefs, sexual orientations, and no matter what minority group that you belong to, or someone does belong to, you will notice that the algorithms are practically look at the majorities and awards them, and looks at the minorities and degrades them or segregate them. Let me just say that it segregates them more and more, and the more segregation happens, the more these algorithms are built on, it's gonna go bad, from bad to worse. Now there are a lot of kind of laws or trying from researchers around the world to fix these kinds of problems. Even a lot of countries here in Canada, for example, we've started a lot. There's a federal kind of funding for researchers in AI, and specifically ones in ethical AI. So there are things that are happening around the world, but we still need more. It's still not enough because the AI is growing too fast, and with that growing fast, the biases are going to grow fast, the segregation is going to grow fast. We need to move faster than that, and we need more funding. We need to move more. So I hope this tells you about it, and this is majorly the causes of and methods of AI biases. As you see, I highlighted this. Mostly, it happens from the assemblage of data sets Also, you know that we're relying until now on human decided cataloging criteria, which is designed by humans, which are biased by nature. So, and the what happened is, we're not involving more people into designing this, more diverse people into developing all of that, or not even with developing or with collecting data. As I told you, those models that were trained on mostly male hands, maybe I don't know, I'm not of course saying that this happened, but in a lot of cases a company wants to do something like this. Say like, this is a small thing, and a hand is a hand, and they don't even pay for people to train them. They collect their employees, train them on their hands of their employees, and that's it. Most of the employees will be like white males, so that's it. So it's not an intentional bias. They don't intentionally wanted to train it and have this outcome, because it caused them a lot of problems. But the thing is, they didn't think about that. There is nothing called, I have started with a group of people here something called, specifically for ethical and AI and ethical development, something we call DBD, diversity by design, because this is very important. It's important to embed diversity into these kinds of things, because we need people from different backgrounds, different cultures, different beliefs, if we want to design an application that actually counts, and say that application for all. And of course, AI applications are everywhere, and they're for everybody. So this was the last one, sorry. So the AI vs humans in cybersecurity. Of course, I talking most about cybersecurity because of what happens, because racial biasing nowadays are happening, as you saw from the cases, is happening because of both security, cybersecurity, and predictive policing as well. And as you said, for a lot of centuries, people were like, which is better, humans or machines? Now we know, for example, that machines are fast, machines are great, they do much better than us, they collect data fast, they analyze data fast, but they also inherit our biases. So I myself believe that, to solve these issues, I have a talk about this, by the way, that you can maybe look at the fear of AI, and I will talk about the humans versus AI indirectly. But here's the thing: humans have more general intelligence that cannot match by any current existing machine. We have a unique compassion, perspective, and genuine honesty. We have, but on the other side, we have a limited memory and amount of energy to operate efficiently. We cannot operate 24 by 24, and the more we do work, the more accurate we'll get, because we get fatigued, we get, the human condition. We are also emotional and biased, and also forgetful. Our learning cycle starts from scratch. So with every generation, we have to start from scratch. They have to learn from their own. I mean, like, we can transfer some kind of data, but they have to learn most of their experiences from scratch. While in machines, they are obedient, non-stop servants, never complain about anything. They can work 24 by 24, not by 7. No one out of them will claim. Never forgetful, with a transferable memory. We can transfer the data easily from a hard disk to another. Zero learning cycles. Biases are inherited from humans. As we said, and I'm going to say all the time, AI biases is an inherited bias, and they are also unable to fix our biases, at least for now. They are non-emotional, which is a good and bad for something, because they're being non-emotional, being uncompassionate, and extremely logical, which sometimes leads you to be also to actually fell for a lie or something, or even fell for a small mistake and make it bigger and bigger, and put what do you call it, innocent people in bad situation. They're also unable to make final determination. I always say that, when we always designed from day one, we were designing those systems, we were telling people, specifically the law enforcement that we worked with, or the government, these machines are not decision makers. They give you predictions, they give you information in much better constructed forms, but the decision is yours. The decision should be done by a human being. Unfortunately, what happened is a lot of them were just seeing that this is a possible attack or a possible a criminal or something, and they act irrationally on it, and without even, because they wanted to act fast, and what's got a lot of people in trouble. But that shouldn't happen, because they are not designed to make decisions for us. And for a better world, I believe it should be like a coexisting kind of a thing. We should rely on machines for something, but we should rely on ourselves as humans for most of the parts, specifically that one that wants creativity, that wants compassionate, that wants context to understand. We should work together, and we should not take anything for granted, and we should keep on working on and on for a better future for everybody. I hope that was useful, and also amusing to you. I believe we should take some time for questions. Vikram, did you get any questions for that matter? I should stop.
No.
Sorry.
No, I didn't get any questions,
I
but
should stop sharing.
I see a lot of clap icons there. So it looks like a few people enjoyed it. And there is a question. So
Did I shock everybody? Did I shock everybody that they couldn't ask me
we'll
questions?
hear from people. Here, Asim.
Okay. All right. Hi, Asim.
Hello. Hi, can you hear me good?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Hisham, for presenting that information. And you've probably already gone over this, but I missed it. So I was curious if you know of any incidents where any of the corporations detected bias, how they were able to do so, and if they took any steps to correct it.
Okay, so I can tell you about something that I've heard about many years. I cannot tell details because it says confidential, but many years ago, there were, as I told you, there were an AI that was developed for banks, specifically in the United States. And it was to easily do a checkup for people when they ask for mortgages or insurance or something like that. And it was actually dropping a lot of people who have good score credits and all of these things, because they are from minorities, but it was accepting white people while they have worse score credit and bad history of payment and all of these things. Now, I have friends into the company. A lot of the people noticed that, and a lot of them complained and all of these things, and the banks say that, sorry, they stopped it for a while. They said, like, there's a problem, there's a bug with our software, so we'll go back to our manual process until this fix. And I just called some of my friends then and said, like, you guys effed up? What happened? He said, like, we didn't F up. It was the biased data that they were putting. And the problem is, here's one example. Like, if you are from a majority, I'm not going to say what is there, in some places in the United States, they were coming that if you didn't pay, they will not put a record on you. They will just call you. I say, like, oh, John, whatever, why didn't you pay this month? I say, like, oh, I didn't get a paycheck. I lost my job on something. Okay, next month, that's it. Nothing is recorded in the system. Next month, same thing. Sometimes they call the people for 6 months or something without adding any data. But if you were actually a minority, a person from a minority, if the second day comes and you didn't pay, immediately there's going to be a record on you. If you come second, third day and paid, they will take the payment, but no one is going to tell you that there was a record on you. No one is going to call you. No one's going to do anything. There's a bad record on you because no one cared to call you. So that was a problem, a big problem. And so what I know is that the company that developed that, because this is a biased data, they would suggest it. I don't know what happened. As I told you, this was just a friendly thing that I talked with my friend, but he said, like, they suggested to clean up that data because it was bringing that biased information, and this was happening for tens and years, for decades, right? So the approach in that case was to clean up the data and make it less biased, for that matter. But there are other cases. Also, I can mention cases for educators in the United States, and that's if you read a book called Weapons of Math Destruction, where evaluation for some teachers were wrong because they were teaching in poor schools, but they were doing much better than other schools as educators, but they live in poor areas, and so the system just just looked at the performance of those students. It didn't look that they have done better since they came in, and looking at their poverties. So it segregated a lot, and people, I mean, like our teachers were fired because of that. I don't know how that was solved. I read that in a book, but again, that's not a problem in data. That's also a problem in designing the algorithm, that you should put design specific algorithm for specific cases, for specific communities, specific groups of the societies, because that's a very poor neighborhood. You don't expect them to do. You don't expect a child who's also working to help his family to do as a child who has rich people, and they give him also like a private teachers for everything, right? So that from my point of view, I would believe that fixing this kind is going to happen through algorithms. Just like I'll give you a last thing. I'll give you an example with the blood pressure happens here in Canada. That women usually, the blood pressure in women is more sensitive to their bodies than men. So if you're a man and you are like one, so like, what's this, 140 over 90, it's like 130 over 85 for a woman, because the women are more sensitive to high blood pressure. So the company that I know, they have designed something that if the gender comes as female, or sorry, if the sex comes as female, then they would bump up the warning even on a lower kind of pressure, so that if you come as a woman, like and having 135 over 85, it will bump you as a man who have 140 over 90. Does that answer your question?
Yes. I guess what the examples you gave kind of indicate that once you have the code in production, then you get feedback that it is biased, and then you go back and make correction.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you can prevent that, because you don't want it to go into production and then,
Well, the problem is, these things are still new. The AI is still a baby, I think, and we learn from the mistakes that we see. But see, the good thing about the global communication is that we not just learn from our own problems. If a problem like what happened with the Obama picture this news is all around the world right now. It's shared, and people from other countries, people from all around the world would have that as an experience, and they can learn from.
Hi.
Hey, yeah,
Hi.
I can hear you.
Great presentation. I was curious as to your thoughts, and maybe the thoughts of others that are still observing, with regards to the predictive policing and surveillance. One thing, obviously, that's going on as a result of the last several events that have happened over the last several weeks with regards to policing and police brutality and systemic racism, is the idea of police reform. And linked to that is the idea of potentially slashing budgets and potentially slashing personnel as a consequence, depending on exactly what that looks like. And one thing that I saw, I didn't get to do a deep dive, but I thought it was interesting. Use case example that was provided by the Camden, New Jersey Police Department. They disbanded back in 2013. And the information about this use case said that, sure, it's painted as having all these positives, a lot of the positives that we associate typically with police reform, but it actually led to a real significant increase in surveillance. And I'm wondering, as we're looking at police reform and thinking about the positives of changing funding and funneling funding towards mental health and things like that. How are we going to keep an eye on whether police departments say, okay, you're going to take some of my money away, I have to lay people off, I'm going to start relying on some of these non-personnel intensive technologies to help me get my job done?
Well, see, the way that I see it, and because we have experiences like this also here in Canada a little bit, the way that we look at defunding police is not stop funding it, but it's like, okay, so the problem in the United States is that if you look at the facts, and I've looked at it since this whole thing started, is like a lot of the budgets in a lot of states going to the police force is not about personnel. It's about militarizing them, buying them a lot of guns and all of these things, and putting in place like policies to like how do we suppress the usage of what do you call it, the marijuana or something like that. Like recently in Canada, we have legalized marijuana everywhere a couple of years ago, and the crime rate of selling illegal marijuana and people going out on driving under what do you call it in the United States? Driving under influence, yeah, DUI. Here we have DOD, driving over a dosing or something like that. So what happened is we have less cases right now, and the police is now needs less funding to fight that thing because it's legal. So it's a part of a bigger policy as well. And I've heard that for example, I live in Mississauga, so we have the Peel Police. That the Peel Police is hiring sometimes people to come give lectures to police personnel that give them something like meditation, like breathe before you take an action. Some of them are bringing people from different cultures. We have here in Mississauga, it's a very diverse city, so they're bringing leaders from different communities, like Indian community, Arab communities, a lot of new immigrant communities, to talk about their cultures, our cultural understanding of their people from where they come originally, to the Peel Police, to understand that, okay, so what sounds offensive, non-offensive to you, might sound offensive to this type of culture. I mean, of course, they are now in this country and there's different, but you cannot just change their whole culture. They just came in like a week ago, and you expect them to understand the culture and change themselves. That is not going to happen. So better understand it, and instead of acting in violence or taking that as directly as offensive, look at the person. You will realize that he's a minority and he's from this minority, and you realize that, okay, it might be offensive to me, but it's not to him. But I have to talk to them and tell them, like, you know what, this is offensive. It could get you into problems. So try to understand that this is a new country that you're living in. Try to emerge into it. I mean, like, ease it up. And there are also a lot of requests here to engage social workers, psychologists into the police forces when they come into, because we do have police brutality here in Canada. I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to sugarcoat that. We have even an incident recently that happened, that people came into a guy. He's like in his 60s, later 60s or something. He was schizophrenic, and he didn't even speak English. He's originally from Pakistan, and he wears the traditional Muslim thing, and he was schizophrenic. He wasn't armed, by the way, but they shot him like 6. I don't know what he's done. He's schizophrenic. He done some specific move, and then they shot him 6 bullets. He died because of that. So we have some closets in our, but since then there was a lot of that happens a couple of weeks ago. But since then there's a lot of things started. Like, before you go to solve a case where you know that there's somebody from a minority, engage someone that understands them, engage someone who is professional in that field, from that culture, and go. And before you do any breaking in or something, let these people talk to them. So I believe defunding is not about firing people. It's just, instead of buying all of those weapons, put that into hiring other people. I mean, I see more hiring coming. hire other people to help those police to de-escalate.
Okay, thank you. That makes me feel a little bit better that this won't suddenly lead to reliance on some of the AI technology we've been discussing.
No, but since you mentioned that, I suggested, I myself was on these boards and not people. I suggested also to invest more into those AI, to make those people come and be engaged into these AI analytics, so that we don't paintbrush everybody with the same understanding that, okay, we are in a country in the West, but when we look at people and you see from their information they belong to a different culture, the algorithms has to act differently according to a data or an input from people from that culture to make better judgments for those people based on information that comes from people who are from their culture, So I think there's another way to fund these kinds of programs to make AI even better and better for the police.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, all right. We have one more question in the chat. I think, Sylvia, was it from you? I think I noticed one question. In the US Constitution, it's supposed to be colorblind, and this continues today, sort of like the system in TV clip. Do you find this narrative as problematic in your experience with AI bias as well? In other words, does the legal narrative bleeding?
I didn't get that. Where is that?
So the colorblind, the clip that you showed, it was, so do you find that in AI, is AI also colorblind, sort of in a?
Well, as I said,
way?
and I will say that AI is colorblind. People who are biased. The more we put data, if you created a program that tells you the photos of cats and dogs, let's just do it as simple as that. Okay, say that put a cat and a dog, and if you fed it with photos of cats and told it those are actually dogs, right? So what is going to happen? If you posted a photo of a cat, it's going to tell you this is a dog because this is the thing that I put into it, right? And again, most of those things, and this is a simplifying of it. But of course, I'll give you an example from the United States that it came to my mind, to my knowledge, by a senator called Rashida Tlaib, who is actually from the Middle East. That in the U.S. Census, which happens like every 10 years, and based on it, you decide what kind of services you would utilize for minorities and all of this thing. There is nothing in that census that calls Middle Eastern. So people from the Middle East has to add themselves as white, which is not true because they're not African Americans, they're not Asian Americans, nothing. So they're left with that white, and which creates I identify as white, but I'm not. So I'm not gonna get the services that matches with my culture or with my background because I don't have that option. And there was a lot of talks about that through years to add this in the census, and for some reason it wasn't until now. It's not there. So this is one of example that I could give you. I don't know if that's enough answer, or at least it's comes around the question.
Yeah. So I think Sangdo, are you here on the stage? No. Yes. All right. Okay. So let's go back to the network launch. Before we do that, thank you, Hisham. This was awesome to hear all the stories, and we'll continue the conversation. I think there are times when we are going on the edges of AI conversation and more into the social impact and outside of the realm of AI, but that's bound to happen. It's free-flowing conversations here. So Sangdo, any final words you want to share, or questions, comments before we jump off to the
and I apologize. Absolutely. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
yes.
Hello, can you guys hear me? Oh, perfect. Great.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm having internet issues, so I'm going to have to turn the camera off. But Hisham, as usual, thank you so much for your insights, exposing the biases in AI. I always like to ask, thought leaders and experts in this field, if you were maybe the head of AI for the entire country, how would you roll this out to be done right? Like, what is your concept of, considering all these issues that are going out of control, yet while we are at the infancy stage of AI, really called deep learning at best, beyond machine learning, what would like in a like because every designer, engineer has their, can point out all the flaws and issues.
I think we lost you,
So,
Sangdo.
but yeah. Can you hear me
We
now?
lost you sometimes in the middle, but yeah, lost you
Hello?
somewhere in the middle. But can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear.
No, I'm talking to
Yes, can you
Sangdo.
hear
Can
me?
you hear us? Yeah, we lost you a little bit in the middle,
Yes, can
but
you
I
hear
think
me?
I get. Yeah, I get the gist of what you do. And to be honest with you, as I told you, I think I laid out some concept that I was working on because I'm in this field, and I'm trying to push something, not just as a person who runs a team or anything. I want to put some principle, and the principle is out. By the way, we will. You guys are going to be the first. We're planning on launching something online. It's copyright free. It's not registered for. Everybody can add to it. Just cannot claim because it's they're doing this because we wanted to make it open. And it's the concept of diversity by design, DBD. Because the way that I see it is like most of the problems are happening because the majority works on these solutions, and a human nature, they don't think about it. It's not because they are racist. I'm not saying that. I mean, like, it's a human nature to think about your group or your society first. Specifically for older generations until now. I mean, like, the newer generations are more diverse right now, but we cannot keep on doing these biases and then give them this system to work on, because it's not going to work for them. So we need diversity, and for many reasons, not just for AI, but we need diversity. We need to invest in putting more diverse people into, because it's not just for us, because nowadays all the mobile application, they are developed in one country, but they put on the mobile, and all around the world people are using it, right? So AI is for everybody, and it is not just about, okay, I want to talk to Canadians from the indigenous community, or indigenous Canadians, or African Americans. It's for everybody right now, and to engage people from all walks of life, from all types, from all communities. I believe this is the beginning. We have a lot to address, but this would be my first thing, because all of the all biases that I've seen in my life comes because people do not understand, do not realize that they're biased, because it's not in their default culture, it's not in their de facto settings that they were born with. So engaging more people, more diverse people, I believe it's a very good start for that. I hope that answers your question.
Great. Thank you, Hisham. And as we talked about in our breakout sessions, you talked about the example of how there's a process and technology of taking pixelated pictures and filling it into look maybe a little bit more standard to high def.
It wasn't the presentation as well.
Oh, right. And Obama happened to turn out to be a white guy, because that is all the data that they have to work with. So I think another issue is people have the product, and then they don't have enough inclusive data, but they're so excited to show what the product can do that they use,
Exactly.
the outdated or the lack of data that they do have, and it outputs kind of a poor experience like that.
Yeah, it's one of the points, that great point that you said, is that it's becoming so competitive. People want to put their product out, so that there some their competitors they will beat their competitors to it, right? And that means we know that it doesn't work well with AI, because AI to be at its best, we need a lot of data, a lot of processing, a lot of work on it. So they just put it out and say like, oh yeah, right, maybe they will have a little thing and tweak it. Then something like that happen. Then we go up and down. And this is one of the things that one of the major things that made AI in general through history goes up and down and up and down, and what we call AI winters.
Okay, great. Chris, you're here. Any final words before we jump back to the networking lounge, or we can continue the conversation there? Chris?
Yeah, I'd love to kind of ask a question. Hisham, amazing job, by the way. You were brilliant in the way that you've kind of simplified it and created a structure of this kind of inherent biases. Because there's a lot of tension and there's a lot of adverse thought processes towards AI because of some of these biases. And it's not giving AI a good reputation. I've been playing a lot in the Black Lives Movement. I'm not sure if you've noticed that, but I'm doing a lot of speaking allyship lately. And I love how I'm probably getting more pullaways from my AI conversations about biases to kind of deal with the situation. One thing that you said that I loved is, the reality is not intentional, right? I mean, that's something that's hugely...
Most of the time, it's not.
Most of the time, where I would love to assume that it's not, right? Like, I don't want to think that everyone's that scrupulous in the back end. Although we know there's some bad players for sure. But there's this idea that, they just didn't even think about it. When you said that really hit home. Is a great way of drawing that out. So my thought is this, though. AI is very much dependent, as far as the biases, especially on humans, right? Yeah. So, because the way I look at it, AI is neutral. It's a neutral. It's neither good or bad. It's what you put in and how you do that.
Yeah. Because
of the human interface that brings in so many of these biases in many cases, that affects the output of good quality AI, over biased AI or things of that nature, there's probably going to be some kind of a downgrade of AI or some pushback that keeps us from moving forward better. Any ideas of how to kind of sidestep that? To kind of speed up the process, perhaps.
Okay, so I don't know about speeding up, because as I told you, we humans are slow by nature. That's why we created AI, because we wanted something faster than us, right? But what I see to make it a little bit more efficient, time efficient, let's say, is to engage more people, because the thing with AI is not just about designing bringing a developer and design the algorithm. I cannot tell this person who designed an algorithm to understand hundreds of cultures around the world, right? When he develops an algorithm, it's a conversation that has to start on a higher level, right? It's like you're in a business, and you know that requirement gathering is one of the most important stages in any project, right? Because if you didn't understand what your client wants, then no matter how great job you do or what great software you put, they're not going to use it, because it's not useful to us. It doesn't match our requirement. Now we're talking about AI, which is a human requirement. Everybody wants to use it. Everybody wants to get engaged. So your client is the whole planet, right? Speeding that process and understanding everything is going to be a very complicated process, but we could start by, as I told you, and I'm going to say that diversing people, that's going to help, because instead of me as a person who I'm multi-ethnic, but I've been traveling a lot, I have a chance to do, but instead of me trying to go and understand every culture that I don't understand or I've never met any people from, I hire someone from there, and they're going to tell me, you know what, you cannot use that emoji because, for example, I'm just going to cannot use that emoji because in our culture, this is a signal of, it's an insult, right? Or something like that. So that's a shortcut. Let's call it, for that matter. So I now understand that I shouldn't include that into my, I don't know, chat software, let's say, right? Yeah. And I believe the more we engage people, the quicker shortcuts we take. Maybe that will speed up a little bit the
So it's
process.
kind of an idea of creating efficiencies by slowing down first, right? And by doing that, then eventually it speeds up the process on the back end. And so another thought is, so then really the solution is really in getting more and more diversity on the touching points initially when we look at the data and the substrate, so really just getting more people involved of diversity. So we're having different perceptions, looking at the data with different backgrounds, to kind of filter out some of those things that, hey, I wouldn't have seen that as a white person. That wouldn't have crossed my mind, where somebody who lives in that culture or has that sensitivity would pick up on that fairly quickly, and getting them all involved. Correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but just so I'm saying, slowing down the process, at least at the first stages, to understand before we put that.
Completely agree.
And this is what I'm saying. Creating those shortcuts on a slower pace at the beginning will eventually come and speed up the process, because we've gone through those shortcuts. We've gone into now the big, we've gone those, small alleys, shortcuts, those alleys, and now we're in the huge court. Now we can run as fast as we want, right?
Because we kind of take the time to do it right initially, which will free us up. So again, it's efficiencies through slowing down.
Exactly.
I love it. Thank you very much. Great job, by the way.
Thank you very much.
All right, so let's go back to the lounge and network for a bit, and then we'll call it a night. Thank you so much, Hisham, again for the session. We all enjoyed it. Thanks a lot. See you on the inside.
Thank you for organizing that. This is a great group. I love coming here.
Great.